Good evening, everyone. So excited that you all can take the time to join us tonight. Really excited to be in conversation with the amazing Tameka Fryer Brown on her work on that flag and other texts that she's written. We're going to get started off with a quick read aloud of the book, and then we're going to get into our conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Tameka Fryer Brown to read, give us a special reading of that flag.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you this evening, and I am going to be reading from a digital copy. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, awesome. Here we go. And that flag, for those who may not know, is a picture book about best friends divided over the meaning and significance of the Confederate flag. And it's illustrated by the amazing Nicholas Smith, who also illustrated the Born on the Water, which is a part of the 1619 Project, a book for children. So here we go. Bianca and I are almost twins. We're the same in so many ways. We both wear our hair in braids. We spend independent reading time together. We play Foursquare better than anyone in our class. We're inseparable. She's my best friend. But only at school. I'm not allowed to go to her house, even though we live on the same street. Kira, Mom says whenever I go outside, please stay where I can see you. Then she shoots a look that means, don't go anywhere near that yard. I know why. It's because of that flag. Mom and Dad say it's a hate flag, a symbol of violence and oppression. Bianca's parents told her it's a heritage flag, a celebration of courage and pride. What I know is I can't go to any parties or sleepovers at her house, and I can't invite her to mine. At bedtime, before my parents tuck me in, I remember my field trip form. It's for the Southern Legacy Museum, Dad says. They have a new exhibit. Mind if I tag along? I don't mind. That is a lot of fun. He even buys me souvenirs sometimes. Sure, I say. Mom and Dad hug me tight for an extra long time. On field trip day, once we're off the bus, Bianca and I link hands. We wait for Miss Grayson to call our names. Oh no, she's assigned us to different groups. I start to frown. Well, when I start to frown, Dad tugs my braids, makes a face, and smiles. I can't help but smile back. I'm glad Dad's here with me. After walking around for a while, we see a red, white, and blue sign, stars and bars. Dad takes my hand. This is something we need to see. First, we see a frilly dress from antebellum days. I picture myself wearing it and giggle. I'd look pretty silly. There's a cotton gin with lots of little puffy plants around it. Wish we could pick some off, I say. Dad glances, but doesn't say anything. When we come to an auction block, Dad freezes. He's not smiling at all. Neither am I. In silence, Dad and I walk to a glass case filled with old photographs. I see soda fountains, poodle skirts, gigantic cars with fins, dogs and water hoses, teenagers crying in the streets, scary men in white gowns holding torches and flags. That flag. Kira! Bianca runs up to me. I've been looking for you everywhere. She throws her arms around my neck, but I don't hug her back. What's wrong? She asks. My throat feels tight. I'm not sure what to say. I just point to the pictures in the case. Then I walk away. Back on the bus, Dad and I sit up front behind the driver. I stare out the window, remembering those pictures and that flag, my best friend's flag. Later that night, my family and I talk for a long time. They tell me things they've never told me about before, about the scary things my grandpa saw when he was just a kid, about grandma being spat on for trying to go to school, about mom and dad getting called bad names and chased by people in a truck, about the Freedom Riders, about Selma, about the Charleston Nine. We talk about the things Black people have to do every day to stay safe. After our talk, I feel scared, confused, and mad, but mostly I'm sad. At school the next day, I wait for Bianca to say something about the pictures. She talks about her puppy instead. I guess those pictures didn't bother her. I guess we're not the same. I guess we're not best friends after all. During reading time, I read by myself. At recess, I jump rope alone. When Miss Grayson asks what we learned from our field trip, I say the Confederate flag is racist. That's not true, Bianca cries. It stands for Southern pride. The Confederacy, Miss Grayson says, fought a war to keep Black people enslaved. Their battle flag is still used by hate groups who want white people to rule. No, Bianca shakes her head. Why would my family fly a flag like that? I don't know, Miss Grayson answers, but it's a good question to ask. I'm trying to beat my grandpa at chess when I hear grandma cry, Lord have mercy. Mom turns up the news. It's news none of us wants to hear. Two Black people were shot in their own front yard by three white men. They show pictures of the men on TV. They're standing in front of that flag, that hate flag. My family and I go to a candlelight vigil to honor the couple that was killed. I look at the crowd. I can't believe my eyes. Bianca and her parents are here. I did not expect her family to come. I wonder why they did. Coming home, we see a new house flying that flag. It makes my heart hurt, so I look away. We pass Bianca's house. They've taken theirs down. I can't stop staring. I wonder why they did. As the late bell rings the next morning at school, Bianca passes me a note. You were right. I haven't spoken to Bianca for days, no sharing books or playing foursquare at recess. But now that flag is gone from her house, so maybe things can be different. Maybe we can be friends after all. I don't know, but I'm willing to see. The end.
Thank you so much. I wish we had where everyone could, I'm sure everyone's clapping on the other end of that. Um, This is such a powerful book. I'm so excited to be in conversation with everyone. For those of you who are just joining, we just had a special read aloud of That Flag by the amazing author Tameka Fryer Brown. And we're really excited to be hosting a book talk today. My name is Deja Brabham. I am the Director of Education and Public Outreach at the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale University. We're going to talk a little bit about where this event came from, but I'm very excited that all of you have taken the time to join us tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping. We were able to enable the chat so you can share out your thoughts and ideas, and we're also going to have a special Q&A conversation after we've had our original conversation. Um, This event was brought to you by, again, we're the Gilder Lehrman Center, and also in collaboration with the Yale University Library System. And so I'm just going to let Nick share a little bit more about that. I've been really excited to be able to collaborate with him on this project.
Thank you, Daisha, and thank you, Tameka, for a great read, for a great book. My name is Nick Wansala. I am the Kenya S. Flash Librarian Resident at Yale University Library, specifically working in the Staff Development and Engagement Department. This whole book talk, and we have a few other events coming up next week as well as a part of our Citywide read for Martin Luther King Jr. Every year, this is the third annual version of that. So every year between today and in the past, we try to highlight a book, usually a children's book that talks about MLK's legacy, his ideas, and the themes that he talked about during his life. And when Daisha brought me attention to this book, I felt like this was a great way to have that conversation. So I'm glad to have Tameka here today, and we can kind of get into it.
Thank you so much. And just for context, as Nick shared, I have been wanting to host a book talk with you, or to host some type of event on this book since I read it 2 years ago. So I'm so excited to be in conversation to see this kind of finally come to fruition. We also are thankful for our other sponsors, which is the Anti-Racist Teaching and Learning Collective, which is a local grassroots organization in Connecticut that focuses on teaching anti-racism in the classroom, and also the local New Haven bookstore, and to me, the heart of New Haven, Possible Futures, who is also helping to distribute the books that we're going to be giving to our participants today. So with none, with to get us started, I'm really excited to introduce Tameka Fryer Brown, who is a native of Miami, Florida, who has also called Charlotte, North Carolina home for over 30 years. She is a picture book author who writes to sow seeds of love, self-love, pride, connectivity, and inclusion in the hearts of children. Her first literary accomplishment as a children's book writer came when she was awarded one of two first prizes in the 2008 Cheerios Spoonful of Stories New Author Contest. Her books have won awards like the Charlotte Huck Honor Award, the Charlotte Zolotoy Honor Award, and the Jane Addams Children's Book Honor Award. They have also been featured on best book lists by the Cooperative Children's Book Center, New York Public Library, Kirkus, Bank Street College, NPR, Parents Latina Magazine, Little Free Library, and more. Tameka's recent titles include 12 Dinging Doorbells, That Flag, and All the Greatness in You. Her next book, Prayer Is, will be published in 2026. In her spare time, Tameka enjoys introvert-friendly activities like playing board games, Netflix binging, and overanalyzing everything. I'm so excited to be in community with you today. A proud member of the Brown Bookshelf, Writers Illustrators of North Carolina, and AKA sorority. Happy Founders Day to those of you who celebrate on this call. And Tameka is represented by Marietta B. Zacher of Galt Zacher Literary Agency. And to learn more, we shared her website in the chat. I also will share that I'm also a well reader. I was sharing with Tameka. She has another book, if you all might be familiar, called Brown Baby Lullaby, which is a really good book if you know anyone who's expecting or new parents. My 8-month and my husband and I love reading it at night. So thank you for joining us here today. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, like I said, I'm going to try and keep this portion, short, just to make sure we have some time for Q&A. But I guess I'm just going to get started off by asking, what drew you to children's literature? I think that to write children's books takes a certain amount of awareness and understanding of kids. And what drew you to this field?
Yeah, it was kind of I don't know. I just had this light bulb moment. I just to give you a little background. I started out in medical sales and got married, had a baby. And when my baby was 8 months old, I was told by my supervisor that they needed me to increase my travel and they wanted me to be on the road 4 nights a week. And you have an 8-month-old. I had an 8-month-old. I could not do that. I was not going to commit to doing that. So I came home from the workforce, and then before I knew it, that one baby had turned into three babies, right? And when my youngest daughter was about 2 years old, I was looking to do something else, outside of that full-time mommyhood, but not go back into something like sales or whatever. So I was like thinking, what can I do? And I happened to be reading a picture book to her one day. And I, reading was just everything throughout all my kids' childhood. And it was something that I loved, the picture book as an art form. And so I just had a light bulb moment. I had been thinking about legacy as well. Like when you have kids, you start thinking about that, right? And so I was like, this is it. This is what I can do, something that would be more cerebral, but would also satisfy my need to create legacy, not only for my family, but for the world to show that I was here long after I'm gone. So yes, I just had that light bulb moment. And I think I'm drawn even more so than that to writing for children because they equal possibility, right? Um, every good thing that we hope for in our society, if we want to see it come to fruition, it starts with focusing on our children and the type of people that we want to help them grow up to be. And so I think as a children's book author, I feel like I'm playing some small role in bringing that to fruition. So I think that's why I like to write for children.
Yeah, there's such a like you said, children do represent such possibility. And I
Mhm.
guess turning to that flag, what really struck me about this book is that it really is just so powerful in the way that it looks at such a complex topic and one that draws or sparks so many emotions to see that play out with children.
Mhm.
And so I wonder why the flag. You we weren't able to cover it, but for those of you who are going to receive the book, you'll be able to see in the last page. There's a real comprehensive overview of why the flag was a point of entry for you in terms of looking at this conversation. And we talked a little bit actually before we got on the call of the fact that you are from the South, and so for a lot of children, they are interacting with the flag a lot more than particularly here. We're also talked as Nick mentioned, we're having students across New Haven read this book. And what was really interesting to me is that a lot of the students weren't necessarily familiar with it because the flag isn't, it's definitely flown here. I remember seeing the flag when I grew up here in Connecticut. But why the flag? Why did you choose this part,
Mhm.
that symbol?
Mhm. Um, believe it or not, I first wrote this book in 2015 following the Charleston church shootings. And back then, the murderer was seen on social media, or when they were doing their investigation, they found pictures of him on his social media, like brandishing the flag, like standing in front of the flag, holding guns, etc. And there was this debate, that tends to recycle itself from time to time, and it became a big thing again in the aftermath of that about whether or not the Confederate flag was really a hate symbol or whether it was just a symbol of Southern heritage and Southern pride. And in the traumatic aftermath of that shooting, that massacre, I was like, no, we need to set the record straight. I'm going to try to set the record straight for our children because we need to not be having this particular debate go on and on generation after generation when there is so much evidence and factual evidence to tell us what this flag, how it came to be, and even how it's still being used today. So I just wanted to teach kids, share the truth with kids about this symbol and that flag, and hopeful in hopes that not only would they learn some truth, but it would inspire them to ask more questions and for families to have conversations, um, you know, as an a result of this book and the story.
Yeah, and that's such a I think your word as you were mentioning earlier, the thought of legacy. I think
Mhm.
there's such a legacy of learning about the flag or
Mhm.
history of people learning about the flag. One thing that I love bringing to my college students, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Daughters of the Confederacy, and their attempt to really focus in on education and to have students see this as a site or an image of pride or a symbol of pride. And I think it's really interesting of you trying to bring about a new legacy of how are our kids today going to,
Mhm.
learn more about this. One thing I also thought was really interesting about the book that I want to ask you right off the bat is how you why there's the conversation about the flag, but I also feel like you're also tapping into how kids have conversations about really hard topics. It goes without saying, we live in a very politically rife, scary time for a lot of
Mhm.
people. And for those, especially for teachers in the classroom, you know that our students are processing this daily. It's very hard to get away from it. We live in a very hyper visual time where we are constantly seeing symbols. Were you also kind of tapping into a broader framework of a lot of other symbols as well when you were writing this book? Or, I know that your main motivation was the flag.
Mhm. Well, I was focused on the flag, and teaching kids about the history as I talked about. But stories, books, conversations don't stay in a bubble, right? So my hope, my thought was that when you're starting to talk about symbols that harm people, it allows you to broaden the conversation. Not only is it Confederate flags, uh, um, as it relates to Confederacy, there's the statues, there's all these other things. And then you move beyond the Confederacy. What symbols are there today that cause people pain? What actions? What tropes, stereotypes? All these types of things. I just think this book and stories like it can be entry points to having broader conversations, and it allows kids to feel comfortable asking questions. A lot of times also parents don't know how to broach subjects, how to open conversations. So if you find a book that will allow you to kind of from an objective third party space share information, and then you can then have that open the door to that conversation with your kids. They can feel comfortable asking their questions, because we started based on something more objective like a book, and now we're in this conversation, and now we just keep it going, and I can ask you all the questions that maybe I didn't know how to bring up before and you didn't know how to bring up. And so I just think that as it relates to the impact, or how this story can be used, it's just a way to open the door to conversation about about our society. And there's lots going on, as you alluded to, in our society today about not only justice or lack thereof, about compassion for other people, understanding their point of view, caring about their point of view. Just there's just a lot of different ways, entry points into what's going on today, that can be embarked upon just as a result of reading a book like this.
For sure. It's so interesting thinking about the fact that you wrote originally kind of thought about the concept for this book in 2015, and now we're just a little over 10 years. And so
Yeah.
much of the landscape has changed. I wonder if you have any thoughts on where does this book, it might be a little bit of a similar question to the last one of where does this book stand in this current landscape? In many ways, things have very much changed since Charleston.
Absolutely. And I tell you, when I first wrote the book, like nobody wanted to buy it. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, so I actually put it away. We sent it out and it was roundly rejected. So I put it away. And then 2020 came.
Mhm.
And everything from George Floyd to Breonna Taylor, my Arbery, all the things that were happening, and we were supposedly entering our phase of racial reckoning, right? Um, and so people who had read the book before, and my new agent, they were like, it might be time to send that book out again. And we did. And at that point, it went to auction. So, which means some, more than one editor or publishing houses bid on it. So then that was 2020. Then it came out in 2023 at the height of the book banning.
Wow. Yeah.
So the journey of this book from the time I wrote it to the time it came out to today, I mean, it's seen a lot, right? Um, I will say that to date, I have not seen it show up on any official book ban list. But I think their strategy has changed, and now it's a lot more soft banning, or people obeying in advance out of fear. And so, there may be some of that going on. But see, this is an example of the fact that um, it takes courage on
Mhm.
all of our parts, the writers to write, the publishers to publish, the educators to present. But it has a role. And I think today is just an example of that. And I've shared it with kids, and I've had similar experiences to what we were talking about. They are very engaged in this story, and very invested, and they have thoughts, and they want to share their thoughts. And I love it. And when I present it, I don't approach this as there's a right or wrong answer to what your thoughts are. Let's share them. Let's talk about them. And yeah, so.
And there's such a, love the word role. Like, what is the role of this book? And I think there's such an important space for kids to be able to process.
Mhm.
Especially as you said, in the height of book banning and standards changing and people in many ways trying to stifle our children and to say, oh, well, no, we're not going to have this conversation here. We're not going to have this conversation in the classroom. We're going to have it at home. We're going to have it here. We're going to have it here. That in many ways, kids don't have a space to process. And sometimes it's just so helpful to have a space to say, hey, I have a question. As you said,
Yeah.
I love that part, just having a question. I want to continue on to think about what are the different roles of why you chose to position people the way that you did. And I want to start off with the role that really stuck out to me. Um, we were talking a little bit about before we got on the call. In both of the books that I've read from you, you really center the Black fatherhood experience. And not just in terms of their actions of how they present in the book, but also the imagery and the actions. And the father in this book, Kira's father, really plays an important role. Because even as you were reading in the read aloud, you can kind of get the sense of Kira just, yeah, sure, Dad, I guess you could come. And oh, you want to go in this room? I guess. I kind of want to be with my friends over here. But for you, why did you choose to for Kira's father to be the one to guide her through that conversation and the intentional ways that he was trying to nurture, care for, and love his daughter throughout the book?
Mhm. Here's where I shout out my husband. Because I personally grew up with my mom, right? And so my husband has been just a great source for me as I'm creating these stories. The way that he interacts with our kids, and at first, to be honest, when I first drafted this story, it was the mom who was kind of guiding through this stuff. Like when I very first did it, I changed it relatively early on. And you know why I changed it? Just from a perspective of my own personal emotional truth. Not that the mama couldn't have done it. I mean, but I am, if anybody's like, I'm just like always on a level 10 when it comes to my kids, right? I'm just like, I don't know, I'm ready to go at it. But my husband is calm, and um he's just like that dad in the story, so I wanted to honor him, I think,
Mm,
in this depiction. And I wanted to honor how open he is with our kids, emotionally open, how he engages, he allows them to think things through before he gives his perspective. If you see, he lets Kira go through the museum, kind of is experiencing it, engaging it, and then when the right moment came, then he kind of like, okay, let's have this conversation. I think I just, to be honest, I think I wanted to honor that part of him. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's the truth. I do think it is important to show uh, in books all the many representations of all the many Black dads who are just like that, right? And that's important for me to do. So yeah, in every book I've written where there's a Black father who is involved and who is loving, and because that's my reality and that's the reality of the majority of us. So
Yeah, I really appreciate. I know I will be like I said, and just in terms of your other book, my I know my husband appreciates it of just smiling whenever he's able to see representation from himself and how he
hmm
wants to show up for our our daughter. I think also the other piece of this is that you center so much on the father, but you also show a whole family effort of really nurturing Kira. Not only in terms of the mother, but you also do that with the grandparents. And I thought that was also really powerful of them all coming and showcasing the evolution of systematic racism as well.
hmm
That my
hmm
grandfather experienced this, my grandmother experienced this, this is what we experienced, this is what you may experience. That generational, as you said, legacy.
hmm
I thought that was also really interesting that you chose to do that.
hmm Yeah, that's reality too. I think that so many of us engage with our families on an intergenerational perspective. Our grandmothers, our aunts, we're just all. I think when I think about family growing up, I don't just think about immediate family. I think about all, all of us, growing up as family, and that's just. I think that's important too. I think a reason that a lot of lack of knowledge about history happens is because, folks don't have those conversations as much as they used to. And so that's something that I definitely want to represent, that we need to be engaging with our elders and knowing their experiences. We know we're not going to always get them in school, right? That
Hmm.
information from school, but we still have folks around in our lives who've lived these things and who can teach us lessons about not only what happened in the past, but how we can recognize what's going on in the present so that we can successfully make it to the other side in the future. So yeah, that intergenerational part is really important for me as well.
Yeah. You know, and like I said, so much was focused on with Kira's family. One thing that I was really curious to ask you is about the conversation going in Bianca's household.
hmm
Um, and I wonder, there's so much, I think there's been so much about the talk of what happens in families. And I wonder, what do you imagine, or if you had to add in a script, what do you imagine the conversation would have been like for Bianca and her family in terms of their conversation of bringing the flag down?
hmm And I will say that when I talk to kids, that's the question I ask them. What do they think?
Mm,
But I do have thoughts. Uh, in my mind, Bianca goes home after the interaction at school, and she has questions, right? And she probably has questions that make her parents uncomfortable. But I'm gonna say, to their credit, they engage her and answer as best they can based on their perspectives. And then when the incident happens that they all see on the news, there's some things that they probably cannot skirt
mm,
anymore, that they've got to confront. And I will say that a lot of people, some people read the book and they say, I don't believe that the parents would do this, that, and the other. And some parents wouldn't, right? Some of
mm,
the people, they wouldn't. But I do, having grown up in the South, I do know that there are white people who totally buy into the fact that the Confederate flag is not hate, it's heritage. And there have been people who had held that perspective, but once they allowed themselves to learn truth and not avoid that, and sit with that and allow that to change them, that they were also able to change their perspective on that and like things as well. And so those are the kind of people that I imagine Bianca's parents to be. And so that, that's why change was able to be affected.
And so you have the role of the parents. Another conversation I wanted to ask you about is the role of educators. We have so many teachers who are logged in today. And in reading this book, I was reminded of a kind of core memory that I had from fifth grade. And I remember being in fifth grade and watching the 1776 musical. And if you all are not familiar, it's a musical that tells the founding of the country. Very, seemingly innocent. And there is a part in that film where one of the senators is discussing the role of slavery, and he's in many ways lambasting the North for their role. But in that scene, to me, it was so disturbing as a young kid of watching this senator hop up on a desk and bright lights flashing. If you all are familiar, if you haven't, you should watch it. It's a really interesting scene. It's called Molasses to Rum to Slaves. But he begins whipping into the air and he's screaming out different names of African tribes. And I remember sitting as a kid, sitting with that thinking, this seems, I don't think I had the words to say that, but violent.
Hmm. Hmm.
But my teacher didn't say anything.
Hmm.
What I do remember most about that is her being behind the desk and
Hmm.
still kind of grading because it was movie day. This is when they had the big box TVs out. Um, And I was thinking about the role of Miss Grayson here and her role. And I wonder if you had any thoughts of why did you craft her in that way, to not tell Bianca. She's not separated, so she's not behind her desk
Hmm.
while something is going on. She seems very present, but she also makes a decision to say, you should talk about this at home with Bianca. And I wonder your reasoning for that. And what do you
Hmm.
think about the role of teachers in guiding our kids? Right? Because there's still so much work to do in education, but I think that has been a lot of work that teachers have done. We've come a long way, I think,
Hmm.
from a teacher showing a film like that and sitting
Hmm.
behind the desk. So I wonder what you think of that.
Hmm. Well, of course, I'm coming at this as a community member, a parent, a writer, not an educator. So I'll stipulate that up front. But I think the role of Ms. Grayson, um, was to encourage critical thought, was to share the facts and to encourage critical thought. And she made a decision, as you noted, not to share, anything that really sounded like a personal opinion. It's the facts, you know. And when Bianca had a follow-up question, why would my family fly a flag like that? She validated her observation, and that she had a good question, and she directed her. Well, she didn't even tell her to ask her parents, right? She just said, "That's a good question. That's a good
Hmm.
question to ask." And she let it there. Now, we don't know that Bianca asked a follow-up question. Like if she had asked a follow-up question, what would Miss Grayson have said? We don't know, right? But she validated Bianca's thinking skills, that she came up with a valid question, and she validated her valid question. And I think that children see their teachers as truth tellers, particularly young children,
Hmm.
unless their teachers do something to betray that trust, right? And I think that's an awesome responsibility. Um, and I think that, you know, it means that we should all, parents, teachers, caregivers of kids, honor that responsibility and tell them the truth. about things in age appropriate ways as much as we have the words to do. Um, but yeah, when they have questions, tell them the truth. And I think that's important for Ms. Grayson as an educator and all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that idea of, the entire community really holding our kids
Hmm.
in love and
Absolutely.
supporting our kids. And I'm going to ask one more question because I said I was not going to go over,
Yeah.
I want to turn this over to the audience. But the last question I have is the role of harm here. One thing that really struck me at the end of this book is that there isn't the stereotypical kumbaya between Kira and Bianca. They do not come back together in the way that I think maybe some of us would want them to. And I
Mhm.
wonder why you chose to honor the harm or the what Kira felt in that moment, especially in the time period where we kind of demand closure and acceptance and forgiveness very quickly. And you chose not to do that, and I wonder why.
Um, because Kira was harmed, and that is emotional truth. And when I write, no matter what it is, if it's a happy joy book or something deeper or more serious, I want to honor the characters and young readers' emotional truth. And if something really hurts us, we need to honor ourselves enough to acknowledge that and then give ourselves time to work through that. And I definitely was going to allow Kira the time that she needed to do that. Now, I would say that I think that the book ends on a note of hope, right? It's just not that rainbows and sunshine, like you said, tied up in a bowl, kumbaya, happily ever after hope, but it's the hope of possibility, right? It's the hope that when someone has harmed you and they've recognized that they have harmed you and that you see that they have what seems to be a shift in perspective. Okay, I see that. I acknowledge that, but now I have to still be true to myself and behave and move forward in a way that honors me. So now the possibility is, and this is a really great. I mean, she's willing to see.
Mhm.
Doesn't She doesn't know where things are gonna end up, but she's willing to be open-minded and see where life takes them. I think that's as much hope as one could expect of someone who's been harmed by their best friend, um, you know, unintentionally. Oh, no, I mean, definitely unintentionally. Bianca did not have that intention to do that at all. She's just following what her family's taught her. But just the circumstance in and of itself, regardless of intention, it was hurtful once she became, aware of truth. And this is not an excuse for us to not tell kids the truth. It's an excuse for us, or it's a reason for us to just be the best kind of people that we can be, to acknowledge other people's experiences and figure out, how we want to respond to that. Do we want to continue to do things that hurt other people because we have a right to, or do we want to use compassion in guiding the type of people that we are and how we move in this world? And so, yeah, just being emotionally honest and true in this story, and this story especially, because it is dealing with such a significant topic. And I just wanted to honor and respect the characters and the young readers who may have experienced similar similar things.
Such a wonderful, I think also position to be willing to put your hand out. Not to necessarily move forward, but to offer that. I think it's
Yeah.
such a beautiful way. I want to turn this off to the questions from the audience. We have one, but if you want to take some time just to reflect and share out some thoughts. And then Nick, I'm not also sure if you want to ask a couple of questions or to get into further dialogue about the
I
book.
I just want to say I'm just glad that I was a part of this conversation, and seeing you two mothers talk about this is a very interesting perspective for me. Tamika, I feel like you sold yourself short by saying you are making a small contribution. I think this book is a
Massive.
very massive contribution to the not only this kind of conversation, but history in general. And Daisha, you kind of asked the question that I was already thinking about as far as what role these days do parents have now when it comes to educating their children about history? Because I know there's already a lot on teachers, and I respect I have the utmost respect for teachers, especially in this day and age with all the limitations that are seeming to be coming on down on them, and the role that parents have to play now more than ever. And being honest with that, because you've challenged me. I think uh, Tam, I had a conversation with Tam when we did one of our readings about some of the language that you had in your book and how honest it was. And I felt kind of shy about being that honest, especially with kids, because in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to break their innocence just yet, because it's like once that's broken in the world that we're living in now, it's just I don't know. I just felt very hesitant on that. But Tam was like, nah, you gotta be honest. You can't shield your children away from things forever, especially when it comes to history. So I just want to just say thank you so much for being so generous with your time with us today.
Well, thank you for saying all of that. I really appreciate it. And that makes me think about, I too have been the parent focused on preserving, what I call the racial innocence of our kids for as long as possible. I think we live in a time where um the focus, it's more important now to focus on equipping them um for what's going on around them. Like, I don't know if you remember the first time you felt like your racial innocence was broken. But for me, it was such a blindsiding experience. It was devastating. And I feel like if um, I had had more conversations up front that kind of let me know, okay, what I may encounter in an age appropriate way. But just to be aware of certain things, then I wouldn't have been so devastated. Um, and so I think that there's that line that we as parents have to walk between um, that protecting them and equipping them. And I think that, we know, like, and sometimes the kids guide us, right? They tell us, they start asking questions. We think we're protecting our kids for information. Nowadays, information is coming at them like they don't have to even seek it out. It's coming at them. So that is another reason why, we have to be prepared to have the conversations and have tools to use in order to more easily enter those types of conversations. And we'd be surprised at where, they take us, and how much more, how much we'll be strengthening them um to deal with whatever comes at them.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
thank you.
during the reading session, I saw a child's mouth drop towards like the middle of the book where it talks about the shootings and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, wow, I'm seeing a legit immediate impact on a child's awareness of what's going on in the world or what's has gone on in this world. But like you mentioned, it's needed, and I'm glad we have a book like this as a tool to guide young people through those conversations.
Mhm.
So we have a couple of questions. So the first one is going to be, this is from one of our Yes D25 teachers. Hi, Alejandra. I love that your love. I love that you never denied the humanity of people who might want to continue to wave the Confederate flag, which can be so hard when a symbol represents oppression. What inspired you or pushed you to make our humanity or even the humanity of people who might hurt us so central to the story, even when grappling with something like that? I also thought, I don't think that you ever say like, hey, it's cool, but you also like you honor the humanity first, and I think that's a really good point, Alejandra.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that it just goes back to the fact that I want, sometimes we communicate to convict, and sometimes we
Mm,
communicate to convince. And I think my goal was much more on the to convince side. And you're not going to convince anybody of anything if you make them the absolute villain, right? With no redeeming qualities, and no understanding of their perspective. And so, like I said before, I know people who have embraced this flag as something that's just heritage and a representation of Southern life, like sweet tea, and magnolia trees and whatnot. But it's um, and they're not necessarily the most evil of the evil people in the world. They just have a different understanding that's not rooted in fact. And so, yeah, I mean, those were the characters in my book, and I think, like I said, if my goal is to get people to read the book and to understand it with an open mind and an open heart, then it was important for me to make sure that all of the characters um, were represented with that level of humanity. But thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and also, and all the characters feel have a place in the conversation.
Hmm.
They're welcome to share that. I just want to share there was one question about the back of the book, which I'll just show. You all can't see because my screen is blurred, but there is a long author's note about the Confederate flag, sharing the history, sharing the story of the flag in the back that is accessible for young readers to navigate. The next question focuses a little bit on storytelling and what role do you see storytelling in helping individuals and communities confront symbols and history and their impacts today? Like I said, I think the symbol we talked about earlier, the symbols
Hmm.
of 2015 to 2020 are different in 2026,
Hmm.
given especially recent events. What do you see the role of storytelling in helping to, bring community together?
I think it's vital. I think books for all ages um, are methods for us to um, be access information and then be able to come together to discuss it and to have discussions. I think that's the role of literature. Even when we're reading books on our own, is to enlighten and to encourage us to think critically. To encourage us to consider somebody else's perspective, and then that allows us an entry point for conversation with somebody who may think differently than us, because now we know a little bit more about how they think, right? And so now we can have an informed conversation, and hopefully maybe we can reach a point of shared understanding, if not even agreement, on how to move forward. And all of that is vital to community building, community a connection, community building. It starts with conversation and understanding, and just respect for other people's perspectives. And I think books allow us to experience all of those things, whether we're reading them alone or as community reads, as book club reads, and things of that nature. So, yeah, classroom reads.
Yes. Thank you, Alan, for that question. The next question is from our Associate Director of the GLC, who said, "What a wonderful book and conversation." She was wondering about the role of schools, and especially public schools, in allowing children from different backgrounds and perspectives to learn from each other, and to challenge each other when need be, which I think is also really important of focusing on that student to student connection, because it seems like, as she said, a profound theme in the book.
Mhm. I agree. My kids grew up in going to Montessori school, at elementary age, and yeah, the thing that really drew me in to that whole philosophy was the multi-age learning and the kids learning from one another. And I think that is true in every classroom setting, and academic structure, that students learn from one another, kids learn from one another. Sometimes they learn stuff we don't want them to learn, but but
Mhm.
they're learning, right? And so yeah, I think, you know, offering opportunities where uh kids can share their lived experiences um in an environment that's like a no judgment thing. It's like we just really want to um have those open and welcoming, inclusive conversations and experiences, and that allow them to share that parts of themselves. And then that allows other kids to learn. Just like kids can read books to learn about other lived experiences other than what they have, having conversations, making your classroom space an open and welcoming and inclusive space where you say we like I'm a teacher. I'm a what do you call it? An honorary maybe.
Yeah, you're listen.
But yeah, where we allow them to feel comfortable in sharing who they are and what matters to them and what bothers them and all those things. So just having comfortable and open spaces where kids feel free to share and not judged as they share. That's really important.
We have one last question. This is a really interesting one. Have you had a personal experience that was similar to Kira's? And did that help you in informing to read the book, especially growing up in the South in Charlotte?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also even
Yeah.
as a yeah, and also even as a parent.
Mm,
Even very specifically, I remember I was my kids, we were going to this church that was quote unquote multicultural, but it was predominantly white. And they were going to this youth event. And we go up to this house, it was at somebody's house, and they got this flag waving outside their house. And I'm like, this is not the regular American, the US flag. And it wasn't the Dixie flag. But later on, I found out, I think it was like the Betsy Ross flag or something like that, that had its own similar connotations and to the Confederate flag. And I was very uncomfortable. And so instead of dropping my kids off, I stayed. And because Kira's mom in the book is like, stay where I can
mm-mm.
see
We
you.
just gonna keep
You
you
know,
from down there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm staying here. Well, I'm not going anywhere until this thing is over. And that was the last time I let them, participate and go there. So yeah, so and then there are experiences that I had as a kid. Like I said, when your innocence is taken away, when you experience things. I remember being like 9 years old and I lived right across the street from my elementary school. And there was like this 5 or 6 year old boy, and I was walking home and he would call me the N word, right? That's the first time in my life I'd ever been called the N word. And he kept calling me. He said, "Do over, over, over." And I turned around like I was going to do something, and he ran. And then I went back to my house, towards my house, and he did it again. He's inward, inward, inward. And this is like 3 times I go back. And then afterwards, I just went to my house, and I was like, it, it was devastating. And so there's all kinds. It wasn't with the Confederate flag, but it was there are these things, these experiences that we have as young children a lot of times that really just, and I never told my mom. That's a whole nother conversation, how kids endure these things and they kind of keep them to themselves. And that's another good thing about a book like this, because it allows kids to share their experiences. Like they're not alone. This is a thing, a problem with society. It's not a problem with us. It's a problem with these people. Um, and yeah, so let's talk about how to let me validate you and your experience, and make sure this has nothing to do with you. This is all about them. So I don't know. Y'all took me down memory lane, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no. So I feel a lot of us have like these stories, like these
absolutely.
powerful, profound experiences where when we're first introduced that really leave an imprint. So I think that was a really interesting question. So thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
Um, so before we wrap, I think, I wondered if you had any last thoughts. I think for me, especially as a teacher, as an educator, for the teachers who are online, I feel like with this book and through this conversation, and especially during today, it's a kind of reminder that so many of us feel sometimes so powerless in terms of what we see. And it feels as though our resistance is futile in comparison to the wave of negativity that can be, seem so all encompassing. But I think it's a reminder that being in community is resistance.
Mhm.
That whole school holding of our kids, that whole community holding of our children, that really shines through this book is just a reminder that creating spaces to have conversations with kids, have conversations with neighbors, have conversations with people that you might not necessarily agree with, to find some, as you said, some possibility is so important. And like I said, I think this, as Nick was saying, this book has such a profound legacy. And just thank you for joining in the Black literary tradition of so many of art writers today and those who come before us who really used their words to bring about change. And really thank you so much for that. And I don't know if you have any last thoughts before you wanted to close out.
I just thank you for the honor of inviting me here to participate and for choosing that flag as the All City Read. I will just say thank you so much to all of the educators that are here, and I honor you. It's a tough time to be a teacher and educator right now, but what you're doing, what you will do, it matters. It matters so much. And it takes courage just to be that truth teller that kids expect you to be. Um, Keep telling the truth, keep doing all the things to care for and to help our kids grow up to be the very best versions of themselves that they can be. So thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be sending out a link to our participants to receive a free copy mailed to you, courtesy of Possible Futures, Anti-Racist Teaching Learning Collective, the Young University Library System, and the GLC. So we're going to be sharing that out. We also encourage you to follow our newsletter to learn more about events that we have going on and to keep a look if you're in New Haven, to keep a lookout for our Citywide reads, where we're going to be again continuing to read these books with children and watching them draw their own flags. If you're a teacher and you want some activity guides, you can visit Tameka's website to receive more activities on how to bring this book to your classroom. But thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the evening.